Welcome back to another episode of the XRP podcast. And of course, coming back by audience demand is Mr. Jesse coming in from Apex Crypto Insights. How are you, Jesse?
I'm very good. I'm very good, Paul. How are you?
Good. Good to
Thank you
see
so
you
much for
back on the
having me.
show. We're going to get into a bunch of stuff today. Obviously, it's Monday as we record this. Hopefully, this will go out fairly quickly. As we're recording, XRP has been up almost in the last week, 20%, one of the high flyers. So that's good for the token itself. The general market is on the move. We just reclaimed 4 trillion. And of course, a lot's happening out there right now when it looks like maybe investment is coming back. Jesse, what has been, I know you're more long-term thinker, but you get a lot of people that follow you on X and just talk in general and ask your opinion on how do you think this market compares to recent markets in the past? Because many people are kind of looking at this like this 4-year cycle is over. What's your opinion on this?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm a big believer in Raoul Pal's theory. I forget the other name. You actually interviewed him, I think.
Yep.
Amazing interview. I love your interview with Verson as well and his brother. I love all your interviews. I think like the cycle has extended because I think this is monetary policy. For me, it's I don't even think it's about the Bitcoin halving. It's more the refinancing cycle of the central banks. Every 3 to 4 years, they lower interest rates, print a bunch of money, inject liquidity. I think that's the cycle. And according to Raoul Pal's theory, is they've changed it now. They've extended it. So I think for me, I'm following that. Like the cycle's
So the
not over.
elongated cycle, this could push into 2026. This would really break the concept around Bitcoin dominance too. I know Ben Cowan talks a lot about Bitcoin dominance. You also have quantitative tightening potentially ending. If all of this lines up with Fed rate cut, market returning, longer cycle, this seems like what could be setting up for an absolute huge transition. Would this be the perfect environment for the monetary reset? When you look at everything that's happening at the same time, easing. I mean, what's the Fed's balance sheet now? Like 6.6 trillion, down considerably from what it was just not even 2 years ago. So it's clear that they have been easing for some time, but to actually say it, this week when they come out and talk about it at the FOMC, which I imagine they will. What's your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, they've been talking about a global level playing field, a new level playing field, and a global reset for a long time. Planning to do a deep dive on the level playing field. I think to me that's where XRP is absolutely crucial. The level playing field of XRP. But yeah, I mean, I think something's got to give. That's my only concern because to me, my understanding, this has always been about global liquidity.
Yep.
It's fixing the liquidity crisis because banks can't just keep, excuse me, banks can't just keep printing and printing money like they're printing. I mean, something's got to give, right? And it's all about that global liquidity crisis. So how that's going to play, I don't know. But I think in general, the system is at its end. That's a concern. So I do agree with Verson and them there where, it's I don't know how it's going to play, but it's not good. I mean, in 2020, in my opinion, what we saw in 2020 was just an excuse to print more money.
Right.
They needed an excuse to print money, and they need to blame something. Central banks can lift their hands up, say, hey, we screwed up. This is a Ponzi scheme. We're printing money out of thin air. We're devaluating everything. And because they were already printing like crazy before the event of 2020. Right. So I'm not sure how that's going to play out because, again, I think the economy is very sensitive, I think. But they'll just print, I think, probably to.
Well, you're still sitting on an interest rate of like 4.2%. I mean, this is very high interest rates in comparison. So if tightening could be done, which is still very moderately positive, I think, for crypto markets, especially for the big ones, Bitcoin, ETH, XRP, a lot of those because of their dominance in terms of how investment comes in. But this is a big deal, man, because you got to remember, I think it was Chase and B of A, they all accelerated their forecast on the end of QT. So if that happens, you got to remember the balance sheet already has been reduced by almost a little over 2 trillion from up what was at 9 trillion. So now it's around 6.6 trillion as it sets today. So the likelihood of this coming in, but back to my point, Do you think that all these interesting things that are happening, Fed rate cut, tightening and easing, dealing with what could be a regulatory bull run on the Clarity Act, and then much less, let's talk about tariffs and, the lowering of interest rates. Is this setting up for something bigger?
Yeah, probably. I mean, to me, it all comes down again to the XRP Ledger. I mean, how are they going to use this escrow? What's the plan for the escrow? How's this going to play? Because we something's got to give.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, I think we're going in a bull run in general. They're going to print more money. I mean, this is the fourth industrial revolution. I think crypto, especially the ones that have utility, are going to go eventually. I mean, people are going to shake their heads because we have tokens that are capturing the utility of network, and this has never been seen before. You can't compare this with stock markets in general. This is not just based. The price doesn't move just based on speculation. The utility that some of these assets are going to see is mind-boggling, and so I think it's up for sure. But this whole global reset, like how they're gonna, I don't know. I just don't really, can't tell you how I think it's gonna play. But I mean, definitely, we're going to go to the moon eventually. I think on some of these assets. But
Yeah.
this, how it's gonna, again, I think it all boils down to this level playing field that they're creating with the XRP Ledger.
Well, you're right. And I think you got to look at just all of the acquisitions that have been going on. I mean, I was looking at a piece by Anders. Obviously, we've got the Treasury, G Treasury that came into that of course is now moving into major components. Rail, of course, has been already in the bag. And then you look at, just in general, in comparison of what Ripple is trying to do from a prime side versus Ripple custody side, there's a lot of things that have started to brew into this. Is there anything that they're doing in terms of acquisitions that you would say, here is one to watch in the coming months or years?
I'm not sure, but the recent acquisitions like Hidden Road and the other one that they just did,
Yeah.
I forget the name. Sorry, what's the name of that one?
Well, G Treasury was the most recent
Yeah,
one.
yeah, that one. To me, it's almost like, because of my research in Ripple and my personal convictions on Ripple, how long this has been planned and who really is behind Ripple.
Mm-hmm.
To me, these acquisitions sometimes, and I know my brain just goes there, but, and this might not always be the case, but to me, it's almost like some of these acquisitions might have been planned for years.
Yeah.
Years. Say, you guys are going to build this out. We're going to buy you
Well,
up
there's
later.
no way you can make this many this quickly without it being in a long-term plan. It just
Yeah,
doesn't. Either that or
yeah.
they got some very busy investment bankers.
Well, again, it's who is behind Ripple and
Yeah.
why are they able to literally say that we're going to create a new, because they've said we're going to create a new world currency. It's been mentioned from time to time, or we're going to have the liquidity of a G20 nation and work with all the central banks
Yeah.
and the IMF and not be stopped, because they're essentially saying that we're going to either complement the US dollar as a global reserve currency or we're going to replace it. What people need to understand here is what they're doing is it's the new digital Bretton Woods. It's the Bretton Woods 3. Excuse me. Bretton Woods 3 is what they're doing. So Bretton Woods 2 would be technically considered when President Nixon took us off the gold standard, right?
Right.
And so it's that reset. A lot of people don't realize that the BIS, the central banks for all central banks, the IMF, and all these powerful institutions are sometimes mentioning, and also the Committee on Bretton Woods, they're always mentioning from time to time, sorry, not always, a new Bretton Woods, and Bretton Woods 3, or also known as a digital Bretton Woods. And that is XRP, my friends. And that's what I would love to get into you, because
Well, okay, so let's kind of go that direction for a minute. I mean, you have Standard Charter that has been talking about this major institutional run that probably is going to take, they're claiming, on an institutional DeFi component, probably around 6 to 8 months. Okay. Once we have clarity, the clarity's in, the likelihood is that they're going to open up all these yield bearing assets. We've talked to several companies here on this podcast talking about XRP now rolling into a yield bearing asset. So it is tying into institutional. Why do you think that this is an alternative to the reserve side of where global liquidity will be coming from that would play into XRP? What is the core thesis behind that?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Why do you think XRP would be looked at as a reserve currency. I mean, am I correct? Is that you believe that this is a reserve currency play?
Technically.
Okay.
Can I take about 10 minutes of your time and go
Sure.
on a little rant
Hit it.
as quick as I can? Okay. So this is how I see a Ripple. 1945, the Bretton Woods Agreement is created after World War II. They're trying to figure out how do we set this new global order, world order now after World War II. They look at two options. The the IMF and the World Bank are created the same time the Bretton Woods Agreement is created.
Yep.
It's very important to remember, guys. Okay. So IMF and World Bank created at Bretton Woods 1945. They're looking at two options. The US dollar is a global reserve currency backed by gold, or the IMF creating the Bancor, which is a neutral currency not tied to any nation at all. They go with the US dollar as a global reserve currency. They agree to back it by gold for everything they issue. Yeah. There's an economist at the time by the name of George Triffins. I believe his first name was George, but the last name's Triffins. And he said, this will not work long term because you cannot have a currency tied to a nation, so a sovereign currency, act as a global reserve currency for the world, because that country will have to run deficits. It will have to run trade deficits. And for this reason, this is not going to work long term. But they go with it. 1968, the IMF creates the special drawing rights, the SDR, as a supplementary reserve asset. And it's such an honor to share this with you, Paul, because I've been wanting to share this for so long. So the IMF creates a special drawing rights in 1968, but they only as a supplementary reserve asset to help the US dollar with global liquidity and trade. But they fail. And this is the main thing. There's 3 points I'm going to share with you that almost everybody has missed and figure out where the heck Ripple's coming from. Okay. But they fail because the IMF only gave the SDR to all the central banks, or majority of central banks or whatever.
Right.
They didn't give it to commercial banks, fintechs, companies, corporations, and retailers to help build many use cases for it and get that liquidity that you need to serve as a global reserve asset or a supplementary reserve asset. So the SDR failed. Okay, very important to remember this. Now they failed it didn't get that global adoption is what I mean. I'm not saying the SDR doesn't exist, but it didn't get that global adoption and it didn't get the liquidity required for the central banks to hold it instead of holding US dollars. So the central banks kept kind of going with the US dollar because it was more liquid, more accessible, so on and so forth. So 1988 is when we see the article on The Economist magazine, The Rising Phoenix, get ready for a new world currency.
Right.
Okay. Everybody talks about the front page, that rising phoenix, that new world currency that rises from the ashes of the fiat system. But nobody ever talks about what the article actually said. And again, this is another crucial piece of the missing puzzle for Ripple, in my opinion. So the article argued that there was new technologies on the horizon, and these new technologies would allow them to create a new world currency that would help with global trade, liquidity, and FX. What does Ripple do? It helps with the foreign exchange, FX, liquidity, and global trade. So the article argued that there's these new technologies and that would help with those three things, and that this new world currency would come on the scene about within 30 years from then, which is 2018, which is when we see Ripplenet starting to gain adoption. Right. Ripplenet starts 2016, 2017, but they start getting adoption more like 2018. Exactly 30 years after the article was written, exactly the time the article said that because even on the front page, it said in 30 years, 2018. So, but the article, in a very subtle way, argued that the best institution to manage this new global world currency, was the exact word, the best institution was the IMF because of its experience with the SDR. So
interesting.
What they're saying technically is they're going to redo the SDR, in my opinion. Okay? Because they were not successful. So, very subtle way, they say the IMF should manage it because of their experience with the SDR. Now, the year after, David Schwartz, while he's working for the most powerful three-letter agency in the world, he gets the patent. To me, it's technically the Bitcoin patent. It's distributed ledger patent. Yep. If anybody can Google search David Schwartz Bitcoin patent, you'll see the patent on distributed computer systems. He even acknowledged it a month ago. Okay, he gets that award. He gets that patent the year after the article was written. He submits for the patent in 1988. Gets the same year the article came out, saying that they had new technologies that were coming in the forefront that would allow them to do this. Gets the patent the year after, and then A few years later, in the early 1993, 1994, we see the same agency. He worked for the most powerful three-letter agency. That's very important to remember. 4 or 5 years later, same agency creates a paper, writes a paper on cryptography. It's called Cryptography, How to Create a Mint. And then a few years after, they create the technology SHA-256, which is the same technology Bitcoin runs on. So, but let's not lose our train of thoughts. Let's go back to David Schwartz. So fast forward, I think Miguel Viaz. So this is the kicker, right? Miguel Viaz is being interviewed. He's at Ripple at the time, holding a very high position with Ripple. And he's being interviewed. I think it's Thinking Crypto that was interviewing him. Miguel Viaz came from the CME group, went to Ripple, and now he's no longer with them. He's being interviewed, and he's asked about that escrow. I think this is like 5-6 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. He's asked about the escrow. He says, what do you guys plan on doing with the escrow? And he says, well, in my mind, I know it sounds weird for a private company, but I see us kind of like a lender of last resort, maybe. And he says, I know, like, for a private company, something definitely would have to change structurally. So I don't know, or maybe we could give our escrow, we pass our escrow to another institution and they could become a lender of last resort. My friend, the only lender of last resort on planet Earth is the IMF. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's so it. To me, this is when I realized that the SDR was not successful because it didn't distribute it to everybody. They didn't distribute it to, the fintechs, commercial banks, corporations to help get utility and use cases. That's why it failed. And now the article argues that, they have new tech. Like, anyways, the history I just told you. To me, this is why Ripple is able to do what they're doing, and this is why. And people are probably thinking right now, yeah, but Jesse, if that's the whole plan, what about the lawsuit? Well, that would make you question the lawsuit. Yeah. And I could go in detail there about the lawsuit.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of people that look at the lawsuit potentially as a posturing situation, because we've seen, Gensler's background, but for him to lay on the sword like that was a pretty, striking situation. Back to the patent that you mentioned that Schwartz had. You said it was 88?
Yeah, 1988. He receives it in 1989, but when you look at the patent, he submitted in 1988. Okay. From what I saw. So
that patent has expired since then. It's a 20-year expiration.
Possibly, I'm not sure, but that's why when the Nakamoto story comes out in 2008, say, Bitcoin technology is invented by this guy. We don't know who he is, but he's a freedom thinker. He wants to help us get away from the banks and get away from government so we can do peer-to-peer. Yeah. It's complete BS. Like, the reason, in my opinion, and I heard somebody else say that too, and I agree with it, is the reason they give us that story is for us to embrace the idea of digitization. Mm-hmm. If they come out and say, hey, this is who really created it, people are not going
to. This is definitely a issue that I think a lot of people are concerned with now, is the advanced movement of stablecoins moving really into global finance. Then you have the EU, and also the UK, all pushing for potentially a CBDC. So I mean, that it does play along with what the greater picture could be. Then you look at, and I think I just put that up on screen. The number of acquisitions that Ripple have done, and I still believe we're probably another dozen acquisitions yet to happen that would solidify Ripple even further as potentially a new infrastructure, which leads us to Swift. Okay. And this is the question that everybody asks. All right, well, Linea, Ethereum, big hoo-ha about their partnership. Swift is all in. They go on stage at many conferences and they're basically chanting this new, Linea theme. You think that there's something to that isn't necessarily being said. Explain.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I did 3 deep dives on this about Swift, clearly showing that Swift is using Ripple. I could go 40 hours really showing all the proof, I think.
Showing boil it down as to why Swift would do that. If Swift is, because there's like 30 plus banks supposedly, chartering this. Granted, they're still saying that it's a pilot, which is interesting that it's a pilot if we have all of this development underway. Why would they do that and not just simply come out and say, hey, we're going to actually partner with Ripple?
Yeah. Again, I think to me, the idea that Ripple was the chosen one for a long time had to be hidden from the retailer. Like they couldn't come out and say it. Maybe it's because they need the price to be low.
Why?
I can't remember. I don't have that paper anymore, but I think first of all, I don't think they want the retailers to get rich if XRP goes to the moon. The other thing too is, I think, my understanding, again, just my opinion, is the price needs to stay relatively stable. If everybody hops in because they know, hey, this is the new unified ledger, this is the chosen one, and everybody hops in, the price is gonna take off on them. And I think they do need to keep it low for a while. Possibly, it helps to incentivize partners, because if the price is $100 or $500, it's not as easy to incentivize partners joining network. Yeah. Compared to if the price is $1, because we saw in the lawsuit that they had 1,700 NDAs, so they had 1,700 non-disclosure agreement contracts with different institutions and banks and so on. Ripple had, 1,700.
But listen, I have done deals, big M&As before, and in one M&A you could see 50 to 100, NDAs. So it's not uncommon that you would see that many, and most of the time, Jesse, the NDAs are a bunch of BS, because it's just to kind of cover your ass, really, is what it boils down to. So I don't know the volume. Now it's key. There could just be 5 good NDAs that are the real ones that could be the next, key point to unlocking what Ripple's strategy is, which it's interesting too, because I've had analyst after analyst look at this array of acquisitions by Ripple. And I'm like, there is no company that goes on an acquisition spree like this that doesn't have a plan. They're not just out buying. This is all strategic. It layers into prime custody. It layers into Ripple custody. You look at, what is it? You had Mataco, you had Rail, obviously G Treasury comes in.
Hidden Road.
Yeah, Hidden Road, of course, was the big one. This is a significant strategy. And from the looks of it, there are still a few places that are yet to be done that would play into maybe what your theory is around Swift.
Well, yeah, sorry, and I didn't even answer your question about Swift. So I'll try to answer it because there's so much proof that they're using Swift. So first thing is, in this new announcement, they talked about a shared ledger. They said, they're looking at a new shared ledger, global banks being connected, so on. Yeah. But they act as if this is a new announcement. Right, this is a new thing. They're looking to this shared ledger. They're going to build it out. They're going to use this for settlement. So first thing is the shared ledger, the Swift. I just did a deep dive on this Swift linear on my website, my YouTube channel, showing that Swift. There's a paper from Swift coming back 2022, showing that they're going to use a shared ledger. They're talking about how we could use this shared ledger, responsible, like connected to, and it would have a mechanism connecting all the nations together. This is XRP, right? They're talking about shared ledger 3 years ago, and when you take the paper where it talks about everything that the shared ledger does, and you put in the AI, it says, tell me how this is identical or similar to Ripple in every way. Literally, AI gives you literally like 4 pages of why, okay, this is identical to Interledger Protocol. This part is identical to Ripplenet. This part is identical to CBDC platform Ripple has. So that's the first thing. And I also proved in some of my deep dives that the shared ledger, regulated library network, regulated settlement network, regulated internet of value is what it used to be called. It's the Finternet. It's all the XRP ledger. But the other thing too is that Ripple is the only blockchain company that's sitting on the governance body of the ISO 20022.
Right.
Okay, so people need to think about that. This is supposed to be your competitor, and they're the only blockchain company that's sitting on your standard, because this is a Swift standard.
Yep.
The ISO 20022 is a Swift standard, and Ripple is purposely built.
It's not consensus on there.
No, it's not consensus, and people need to understand that. I'm not saying that Linea and Ethereum is not going to be used for something, but it's not going to be used for the cross-border, cross-asset, and global liquidity. Okay, it's not going to happen, because you need the Interledger protocol. You need Ripplenet. You need the decentralized exchange that is built on the XRP ledger. Yep. You need the order books. You need the XRP ledger. You need the liquidity. People need to understand, it took like 10 years for Ripple to build out Ripplenet and to get that liquidity. First, you have to start with the exchanges, get liquidity on the exchanges. Then you need to build out Ripplenet. You need to get partners. You need to get market makers. You need everything. You just can't throw something out there and have global liquidity.
No,
you need
no
to
doubt.
build out a network.
To me, it looks like that's kind of the model of these acquisitions that they're going after. this piece right here that I'm showing on screen, this is Garlinghouse talking about this. The acquisition of Hidden Road allows institutions like BlackRock and Wall Street to access now a better prime broker. So this would enable them to conduct better transactions, more secure, directly on their balance. All right. So to his point, Hidden Road, Rail, which we know on the payment infrastructure. Now we got G Treasury, another major acquisition. And then you look at the whole move around Evernorth, which is an intriguing component that plays into this from a digital asset treasury side of thing, that is going to be one of those DATs that is actually doing something on the XRP ledger. That's a big difference between what we've seen with most of these treasury companies. So it does go back to the point that you're talking about, is they're laying groundwork here in a big way. But I'll be honest with you, Jesse, we study this night and day, and I am still curious because you can go down so many different angles of what Ripple's strategy could be, but yet they haven't announced it yet. And I think that's the concern that everybody has in the market is, why not just go ahead and let the cat out of the bag?
They can't, because originally it was not built for us. Okay, like in my opinion, because the original, to me, I see it as the new SDR, special drawing rights.
Yeah.
Also as a global stablecoin, and that's something we could get into too, because there's some documents coming out talking about new global stablecoin. It's used as a medium of exchange. It's backed by global financial institutions, financial assets. But anyways, to me, it's
Well, if
it's
it was a global stablecoin, that would have pretty much seized the price.
well, I think it's going to be back because they're looking to do a new Bretton Woods, and if we look at the original Bretton Woods, it was a reserve backed by something. So I think for me, I see XRP being backed because, again, like they're very in a subtle way. The IMF and the BIS and the most powerful institution in the world are talking about a new Bretton Woods. Bretton Woods, a digital Bretton Woods, or Bretton Woods 3, which is technically, again, the Bretton Woods was a global reserve currency
Right.
backed by something. So and we have documents showing that, how the World Bank is saying that XLM and XRP are stable coins. I mean, to be stable, it has to be pegged to something or backed by something, and there was no evidence that it was. So what do they know about the future of Ripple and Stellar that we don't know, of XRP and Stellar, right? Because they're already calling it a stable coin 5 years ago, when it's not pegged at the time to anything.
Right. Yeah.
So, but back to the point, sorry, is like, to me, I think it wasn't meant for the retailers originally, but they do need us to get the ball rolling. And actually, one of the guys sitting there, Tim Gupta, I forget his name, sorry, but he was sitting on stage and they asked him about the retailer. And this is years ago, and I wish I had that video. And he was at Ripple at the time. He's probably still with them. But he said, the retailers, they make a lot of noise. And we don't like that much noise. But you need them because you have a chicken and egg situation. Because I think they need the retailer at first to get liquidity on the exchanges, get the ball rolling. Like you need, and if you want to build unlimited use cases to make it liquid.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think that's one thing that definitely has occurred. But at some point, you have to kind of draw the line in the sand.
Yeah, I think if they could have done it without us, they would have done it without us. But but in order to serve as a global reserve currency and have that liquidity and all the use cases, unlimited use cases, you need to involve. You need it to be really decentralized. You need it to the retailers need to have it because a lot of the use cases are coming for the retailers as well. Kind of is my thinking.
Yeah. Where do you think this goes from here? In terms of just the situation right now that we're dealing with around, well, I mean, even if you look at just the US government, I mean, they've obviously announcing that there could be more potential opportunity to buy Bitcoin as a strategic reserve. XRP hasn't necessarily been announced in that position, but that would make it sensible is to be in this strategic reserve if what you're saying is true.
Yeah, and it might go even further than that. I mean, part of the escrow might be for the Fed, some of the biggest central banks, maybe G7, G20, IMF, definitely. So it might be more than just a reserve, right? Like it could, because maybe that's what they'll use to wipe out debt, the global debt crisis, to a certain degree. So who owns the special drawing rights, who owns this escrow when they start giving it to central banks to bail them out, let's say, or the treasury.
Right.
So I think the escrow, like the Federal Reserve or the treasury might be even bigger than what we think. It might not be just a small reserve. Like it might,
Interesting. Okay.
like the escrow, like who the heck is this escrow for? Because
Right.
Ripple is not a regular private
Well,
company.
even, Garlinghouse even went on this weekend or late last week saying, hey, XRP is at the center of everything. Just to be clear, around this, because that's the big concern, is that Ripple's making all these moves without any adherence to what's going on the ledger. And there has been some struggles. Then you had, of course, David Schwartz stepping down for clear reason. We know now why. He's now being an advisor and probably going to sit on the board over at Evernorth. So the likelihood of that becoming a center of power in the XRP ledger could become real, with how they are trying to use it as a business model. And this is something that I think a lot of people forget, is turning crypto, because we haven't seen a lot of people that have turned crypto as an investor into businesses, and I mean, that's the way we look at it. We look at crypto as a business. It's like any other business unit that I have right now. It's a business. It's a layer of assets that you can generate revenue and income from. Why would a company like Evernorth, especially at the behest of what Schwartz is doing and his awareness of what is going on with the XRPL, not actually make it a business around XRPL, which would be all income generating process?
And Paul, it just reminded me of something. Sorry, is you're saying about all these different acquisitions, right? And I completely forgot to mention one crucial point when I was explaining the history of the Rising Phoenix, the IMF, all that stuff. In that article, in the 1988 Rising Phoenix article, it argued that with this new technology that was on the horizon, that they were going to be able to create this new world currency. It was going to help with global trade, liquidity, and FX, all that stuff, and it would be best be managed by the IMF, or the IMF would take it over, right? And because of its experience with the SDR. But the article, this is a crucial thing I forgot. I forgot to mention how the article argued that they were going to successfully do this, create this new world currency, and have success with this by relentlessly integrating it into everything. So it was with relentless integration that they would accomplish this new world currency that would be able to provide liquidity, help with the effects in global trade. So you're seeing all these different acquisitions. I mean, they're bringing utility and use cases and everything. That's what they've been doing. The interledger protocol and all these NDAs and these partnerships and these acquisitions, they're doing exactly what that article detailed, my friend.
Interesting.
Exactly to the T.
All right. So with all this being, because it seems like we're coming to a head, from the current situation, from a global macro side of things, many of Trump's strategic moves, if you look at what we're dealing with, all the way down to, kind of the macro environment around what's going on with just, some of these rare earths, strategic moves around the shift to gold, why we're seeing gold basically at an all-time high. And now over this weekend or late last week, the stock market is ripping to an all-time high. So we're sitting on the S&P, gold being an all-time high. I'll go to the chart, but I'm looking at gold right now, holding an all-time high, but dropping dramatically. But I think a lot of that's rotation right now, most likely into Bitcoin. It kind of went sideways there for a couple of days, but another major drop today as we're reporting. So it's under 4K again. And if you look at the long term of the Dixie, which has been stabilized here recently, because it dipped down dramatically. What was it? Back in September, I think it was. And now it's back up, a little bit. Then if you look at where we're talking about with just the S&P, I mean, we're sitting at 6,850 as we record right now. That's another all-time high. Opening this morning up almost 1% right now. So where's all this liquidity coming from?
I was going to ask you the same thing, Paul.
Where is it coming from? How is it driving gold to this level, driving the stock market to this level? And then they still claim that there's 7.4 trillion sitting in money markets that is yet to be deployed. So Tom Lee's statement of we are in a super cycle is interesting by far. Where do you think XRP is by end of year?
Oh my goodness. I kind of have, to me, I see it. I don't know if it's just a flip of the switch where they just ramp it up where it's you know what, it's the new global reserve currency. It's going to be backed by these, because the document that I found, the IOSCO document, which is the International Organization for Securities, talked about this new global stablecoin being backed by these global financial institutions, and they would be holding assets that would be liquid, very liquid assets and stable assets, sorry, and debt instruments. So debt instruments alone is like 500 debt, global debt, I think is like 550 trillion. When it, corporate debt and government debt, I think it's like 500 trillion or so. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. It's like, is it just an announcement where it just gets backed overnight and goes to the moon, or? But I don't know. It depends on.
Traced off of, obviously off that 228 low here just last week. Last 10 days, XRP is up 20%. Right now, it's the top performer if you look at the last 2 weeks. Even in comparison, if you look at Ethereum, let's take a look at the same period of time. From that local bottom to where we're trading at right now on current price, 11%. Bitcoin's kind of in the same boat. So it is interesting because it could be a situation right now where we're starting to see this market heat up.
Yeah, I think so.
Go ahead.
What I'm hoping, sorry, myself, Paul, is the ISO 20022, right? Like the cutoff is November 22. And I'm hoping that after this, I'm hoping that that's kind of the green light. That's where like all the banks are talking the same messaging format. So now if the bank A in Canada sends a payment to China, they're talking the same language. It's not, because without the ISO 20022, one bank's messaging format is the first, let's say the first line is the sender, second line is the recipient, then you got the account number and the transit number and address. Then the other bank at the other end, their first line is maybe the sender or recipient instead of the sender, and then it's the account number. It's like the format is not the same, so this needs to be standardized across the board, because when the payment hits the account, that bank needs to know, like, where did it come from, who's the sender, what's their account number, what's the address of their bank. So, and this is supposed to be finalized November 22nd of this year. It's like they're not supposed to extend it again. So I'm hoping that this is the real stupid, pardon my language, the real crazy catalyst that they've all been waiting for. So but just on the charts too, like I think we should be seeing like a $15 to $30, right?
Interesting.
Like 15, 20,
well, there's a handful of analysts that have kind of pointed to these crazy numbers by end of year. I think there has to be a lot of liquidity that comes into the market for it to hit double digits this year. That could possibly happen. We are in an interesting opening here going to the into the FOMC this week. If QT is off and it's clear, that obviously could be a huge bolster for risk assets. So that, along with, another basis point. Do you feel like we'll get the quarter, or do you think Powell could surprise us with a 50?
If he does what he's supposed to do, what he should do, he should give us at least 50.5, if not more. It's absolutely ridiculous that
we're still at 4.25%, one of the highest interest rates out there. So it's depressing the economy for sure. And I think a lot of people are in a position right now where I know so many businesses that just aren't hiring because they are not sure about where this economy is going, mainly because of depressed retail sales, which I'm really concerned about this fall being one of the worst retail markets that we've seen. Yeah. But at the same time, if we start seeing liquidity coming in from the markets, it might open up some profits for some of these people, because a lot of people are setting on, really, if you look back to, I'll just look at Bitcoin in general, but if you look at Bitcoin, let's go take a look from the first of the year. All right. Let me bring that in. June was kind of where but obviously, if you look at just to the low in April, all right, up to where we're trading right now, Bitcoin's up almost 50%. Obviously, if you go in and look at XRP, up considerably more than that in comparison over this time last year, because obviously XRP was under around 50 cents. So if we do see some liquidity coming in and we do see another pump to all-time highs for Bitcoin, That means XRP is probably back at $3, maybe on its way to $4, which is where I think a lot of people are pointing. I'm still in the range of around 5 to 7 by end of year if we see a major catalyst coming into the market. So a lot going to be talking about. Jesse, it's always fun having you on the show. You always bring a different layer of information that I'm not thinking about all the time. So we appreciate you doing that. So thanks for coming in today. We appreciate it.
I really appreciate you having me, Paul. I really appreciate it. It's always an honor to be on your show.
You guys know what to do. Follow, of course, Apex Crypto Insights. I'll leave a link and also show you their YouTube channel right here. Make sure and follow Jesse, subscribe to his channel. And of course, if you have ideas for the XRP pod, let us know. You can DM me over on X. I leave them open just for you guys. So hit me up over there and we'll catch you next time right here on the XRP pod. Take care.